Welcome to the expert series from the CDA Institute, Canada's premier defense and security think tank. I'm your host, David Borys, and today is Friday, July 31st.
Quantity has a quality of its own. We need more ships. I have a lot of sailors to train. I need more platforms. So we know we need a naval presence in all three oceans, 365 days a year, and we're not yet big enough to do that. So my lesson, which I continue to take away, is we need to grow the Royal Canadian Navy.
Off the coast of Hawaii, Exercise RIMPAC 2026, the world's largest maritime warfare exercise, is officially drawing to a close. For 6 weeks, 30 nations and 30,000 personnel have been training across the Pacific. For Canada, this wasn't just a routine drill. With over 800 service members deployed, it was a major test of our national Indo-Pacific strategy, a high-stakes effort to protect global trade routes, support regional stability, and stand alongside our allies. To help make sense of it all, we're lucky to be joined by two exceptional guests today. Joining us first is Dr. Gaëlle Rivard Piché, Executive Director of the CDA Institute, to discuss the strategic influence of the Indo-Pacific for Canada and the challenges in the region. Then, to break down how the exercise went and Canada's strategic presence in the Pacific, is Rear Admiral David Patchell, Commander of Maritime Forces Pacific and Joint Task Force Pacific. Gaëlle, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, David. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today.
To start with, perhaps give us an overview of our current geopolitical relationship with the Indo-Pacific.
Well, generally speaking, I think we need to start by thinking of where Canada stands geographically, right? For the last 80 years since the end of the Second World War, we found ourselves very isolated in North America, to our own benefit, I would argue. Our geography really advantaged us, and the fact, of course, that we had the United States south of our border. But now that the environment is changing, and I would say that some of the security guarantees by the United States have been put in questions by the Trump administration, and especially since under the second mandate since 2025. Canada has kind of realized that we're not as safe as we thought we were in North America, and that we need to really, I would say, realize where we stand and who we are as a country. And so ultimately, Canada is a country with three oceans, right? The Atlantic, that is connecting us to Europe, that is also connected to our commitment under NATO. We're an Arctic nation, of course. We talk a lot about Arctic sovereignty in the current environment. And then we're also a Pacific nation. And I think this is something we tend to forget because we're usually looking towards NATO, but we are an Indo-Pacific nation, especially when it comes to the Northern Pacific. And so RIMPAC is, one of the longest standing multinational exercise in the maritime environment. It is the largest one, as you pointed out in your intro, and Canada has contributed every year to that exercise. This is really a way, actually, to show Canada that we stand next to our allies, that we can work and, I would say, enhance interoperability with a large range of allies. And then we can also do trial and experimentations with new technology, new platforms, and new capabilities in an environment that is becoming, I would say, more and more important strategically. The Indo-Pacific is very important to Canada. We've published in 2024, if I remember correctly, the Canadian government published the Indo-Pacific strategy that really talked about how Canada needs to increase its footprint in the region. And I would argue that militarily, RIMPAC is essential to that. On top of the fact that RIMPAC is actually an American-led exercise with a really big American presence, and then it really helped us kind of hit several birds with one stone by increasing, as I said, interoperability with our closest allies, working with the United States, showing up with the United States, and then on top of that, increasing our military footprint in the region. And that's all, of course, in the context of a rising and more assertive China in the region. And ultimately, RIMPAC, and especially in the current context, I would say is a big show of force. It's a big signal that or maybe not a show of force, but it's a big signal that we're sending to the PRC, to China, to Beijing, about what we are, how good we are at interoperability, how we can work together in a region, and how militarily we present an important counter to their own, I would say, ambitions in the region.
Now, the Indo-Pacific is a large region, a massive region. There are many countries there. I was wondering if we could unpack a little bit about when we're talking about our geopolitical relationship with the Indo-Pacific. It'd be like saying something with Europe, but there are many nations in Europe and we have many different relationships. Do you think there are relationships that we have that are currently our strongest, or the ones that are prioritized by the Canadian government? Or are we sort of trying to get as many people involved as possible in every different way?
Mm-hmm. Well, initially, or traditionally, I would say our strongest ally in the region, of course, is going to be Australia, and as well as New Zealand through the Five Eyes community.
Right.
Because they are part of the Five Eyes group. They are naturally countries with which we share intelligence. Interoperability is easier, and militarily, there's also a lot of cooperation that is happening. On top of the fact that we fought next to the Australians and the Kiwis in Afghanistan, which also helped to build that relationship. But beyond that, I would say that the Navy in the last 10 years, the Royal Canadian Navy, has made quite an important effort towards force projection in the region through a series of exercises and deployments to under what I would call the umbrella of naval diplomacy. And that has helped to increase the visibility of our ship in the region. We know, for example, some of our ships have crossed over the years the Taiwan Strait, have been present or done port visit in the Philippines, as well as in Vietnam. And those are all very important for the region. However, we've been criticized over the last few years for, if you want, kind of being spread a little too thin across the region. The Americans already have a really big footprint. The Australians have a really big footprint, of course, because of the proximity to the region. But for Canada, ultimately, it's about figuring out where we're needed and where we can make a contribution within the larger framework set by our allies. So I think it's always better as a middle power, or I would say a more limited military power, to figure out where we get our best bang for a buck and how we can also pursue our interests. And so I think this is where conversations with Japan are very interesting, with South Korea. We know that for the submarine project, we ended up going with TKMS and the European solution. But there is more, I would say, a military cooperation possible, and even commercial relationships that can be developed with South Korea. So it's going to be interesting to see where the government is going to position itself over the next few months or the next few years. I would argue that the Indo-Pacific strategy that was adopted by the previous government needs to be refreshed to set those clear priorities.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because we did the interview on the sub decision, but one of the interesting points that came out of it in our discussion was the fact that so much South Korean business and government agents were interacting with the Canadian economic agents and political agents. I mean, this is a really incredible moment for two countries that, are slowly building a relationship to suddenly get to know each other very intimately, economically and militarily speaking. And one has to assume that that will only enhance our ability to potentially work together in future projects. And you talk about naval diplomacy. This is so interesting because, as a historian, I think of gunboat diplomacy, and of course, it's very different, right? Than sort of showing up with the cannons and saying we want a treaty. The American-Japan case and all these other cases. But in this case, naval diplomacy is not just about we have a military and we're here, because it really is about engaging in discussions beyond just military cooperation, don't you think? Especially with Japan, South Korea, and others.
Yes, definitely. So naval diplomacy, it's the presence of attachés, it's the deployments of ship, it's port visits that increase our visibility, that creates, I would say, opportunities for diplomatic events, and so on. And so because the Indo-Pacific, I would say, is a region that's dominated by its maritime environment, or where the maritime environment is very present and is central to the region, right? Naval diplomacy through naval capabilities is a good way for Canada to be present and to, as I said, achieve bigger bang for a buck and to really optimize and maximize our presence in the region. But I think where it's interesting is then when we talk about the Indo-Pacific, it's a very large or very broad region. It's almost like a region of regions. And so it's great to collaborate and to cooperate with our ally, like our Kiwi and our Aussie ally in the south, to look at a greater relationship with Vietnam or the Philippines. But I think when we look at the region from a strategic interest perspective, so how do we make Canada safer? I think refocusing our interests or turning our interest towards the Northern Pacific is particularly important. And this is where we see a deepening of relationship with South Korea and with Japan, because we have to remember the Northern Pacific is also the access point or lead to the Arctic Ocean and then to our backyard. And so for us, I would say and this is how the Indo-Pacific is connected to the Arctic and to our own sovereignty in a way that is really important.
Now, you've mentioned that you believe it's time for perhaps a new Indo-Pacific strategy to be issued, and you've just identified the North Pacific as an area where we are increasing, if not our presence, and certainly our relationship, enhancing our relationship with that region. Are there other ways that you believe we could forward or enhance our relationship with the Indo-Pacific? And within that, do you think there's other strategies we're not using yet that could be deployed to enhance it?
Well, I think it's going to be interesting to look at which countries or which companies from the region we choose to partner for military investments, right? Under the defense industrial strategy, we're going to build at home, but we're also going to partner on certain technology. And then we're going to buy when it's technology or expertise we don't have here in Canada or cannot develop fast enough to actually build it or partner at home. You talk of ANWA strategy in the competition for the new generation of submarines. And I think their approach was very good because it gave them more visibility with Canadians. Canadians are now more aware of the options that are being proposed by companies in the region and how we can and how the Indo-Pacific consists of a whole new or a whole other market in which we can go and play. It's not only the United States, it's not only Europe, it's also the Indo-Pacific. At the same time, again, I think the defense industrial strategy was adopted in February. We created the DIA, so the Defense Investment Agency. It's going to be interesting as different projects are rolling out to see where the government decides to invest and also which partner they choose to develop and acquire some of those capabilities. And I would say that from a Canadian standpoint and for our economy, diversification is really good. At the same time, we have to do it in a way that makes sense for our strategic interests and geopolitically. But I think there's quite a lot of opportunities for us in the Indo-Pacific, and I would say with some of closest partners and allies like Japan and South Korea, as well as Australia and New Zealand. But then when it comes to countries like the Philippines, like Vietnam, those are also countries where it's not necessarily going to be about commercial relationship or at least like in the military realm, but I think there's still a lot of potential for military cooperation, increasing our footprint in the region and making sure that the region remains stable and that we can promote democracies, rule of law, and so on through our foreign affair portfolio as well.
Gaëlle, for my final question, I want to think about takeaways in regards to our current relationship and our future relationship, you've certainly touched on sort of a back door into the Arctic, economic potential, the North Pacific, China on the rise, our security, both economically. But if there were some major takeaways that you wanted Canadians to understand, so not necessarily people in our industry, but for the Canadian layperson, what kind of takeaways do you want in regards to the Indo-Pacific strategy that Canada is undergoing and may be undergoing further in the future?
Well, I think we have to remember that Canada is a Pacific nation. And then despite the fact that it may sound very far from us, we are part of that community, and that they also represent very important markets for our goods. So as we're shifting our trade relationships and then we're looking at diversifying our economy, it's not only what can we buy from them, but also what can we export. And I think this is really the foundation of a good commercial and a good partnership and alliance, is when the trade, it's mutual and trade is going both ways, or cooperation is going both ways. And so it's going to be interesting to see in the coming months and the coming years how the government choose to go about it, and what are the different sectors that we choose to prioritize to ensure not only Canada's national security and sovereignty, but also the regional security, but also our economic prosperity.
Yeah, that's well said. It's a large chessboard, and there are a lot of possible moves that we could be taking going forward. Gaëlle, thank you so much for coming on today. I know how busy you are, and yet you took the time to chat with us today and for breaking down the strategic picture today. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Joining us now to look at how RIMPAC played out operationally is Rear Admiral David Patchell. Sir, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a little bit intimidating to be here at something we call an expert series, but it is a pleasure to have a conversation with you this morning.
I feel the same way every time I do the intro, to be honest. Sir, to begin with, for anyone tuning in who hasn't been following the news closely, could you tell us what actually is RIMPAC? And why do we send hundreds of Canadian sailors and aircrews all the way to Hawaii every 2 years to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. So Rim of the Pacific exercise, which occurs in Hawaii, in the littorals in the waters off Hawaii, is an exercise that has been going on since 1971. And this year there are 30 nations, but only 3 nations have participated for all iterations of RIMPAC: Canada, Australia, and the United States. And it is a joint exercise. But of course, given the geography of Hawaii, it is a predominantly maritime exercise. Incredible opportunity for Canada to confirm its commitment to the region, to show our presence, to integrate with our allies and partners, and also to adopt leadership roles. So we are actively leading forces during Rim of Pacific exercise.
Now, so this is the 30th edition of RIMPAC, which is pretty amazing. And I actually didn't realize that we were one of the few nations that had gone every year. That's actually incredible. So with this year, how would you summarize Canada's participation, and what stands out as the primary objectives achieved?
Yeah, so Canada sent, we have over 800 sailors, soldiers, aviators. We have 3 ships and a submarine. We have divers, we have aircraft, and we have staff officers, including leadership. And so that's an incredible commitment for us, to our partner, the United States, and to the other 30 nations. What do we achieve? I think the most important thing we achieve is that presence and that commitment, that consistency of being in the region. But we also increase our ability to integrate with our allies and partners, to prepare in case we ever did actually have to fight in the Pacific. The more we understand our allies' capabilities, the more ready we will be to come alongside them and defend freedom and security in the Pacific.
On that note, could we talk about interoperability for a second? Because I would love if you could kind of drill down. What does interoperability actually look like on the water for Canadian sailors and aircrew?
Yeah, so I mean, to unpack that a little bit first, we've been a member of NATO for many years. 32 NATO nations. We have established communication networks, secret communications, and so operating with our NATO allies is relatively straightforward. Not easy, and we need to maintain those skills. The Pacific is a different organization because there is no NATO in the Pacific. And so every chance we have to come together and improve communications, improve our tactical sort of link pictures, which is how we pass information at sea, and then really understand each other's capabilities. And we do that a number of ways. Canada has the Sea Combat Commander at CCAT in Land and Creasy, who's leading about 15 ships. And so every day those ships are reporting to him. He's providing direction. He's learning their capabilities. Another interesting thing we do to improve integration is we send our sailors to other ships. Whether it's an Australian ship, a New Zealand ship, we have our sailors going to their ships, learning about their navies. What we actually learn is that many of our navies are very similar. We think similarly, we operate similarly, but an opportunity like RIMPAC really emphasizes that, allows us to improve that integration.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That sort of cooperative spirit can always help us in case of times of crises. Now, RIMPAC is often described as more than an exercise. It's an opportunity to test new concepts and new technologies. What did Canadian sailors and aircrews have the opportunity to learn or experiment with during this year's exercise?
Yeah, and I'll answer the question a little bit differently. So RIMPAC's broken down into three phases. The first phase is the harbor phase. And so the ships arrive in Hawaii along with all the forces. They conduct official visits, they do planning, and they play a number of sports. So I have learned that Canada is very good at dodgeball. HMCS Regina won this year's RIMPAC dodgeball tournament.
Go Canada.
But what an opportunity. We do something here in Marpac called Sweaty on the Jetty, where sailors once a week, they assemble on a jetty and they do physical fitness. We did that at RIMPAC as well. Over 200 international sailors came and did Sweaty on the Jetty with Canada lead. And so that's sort of the first phase. Really incredible opportunity for our sailors to meet sailors from around the world. Second phase, the tactical phase, an integration phase. And so during that phase, we do have the opportunity to experiment. And some of those experiments are amongst the Five Eyes partners, electronic warfare, link, as I mentioned, sharing communications. But what RIMPAC really provides is an instrumented range at PMRF, the Pacific Missile Range Facility. So we had the opportunity to fire ESSM, which actually didn't transpire this year, but we had the opportunity for HMCS Cornbrook to fire a torpedo and sink a cruiser. The imagery was just released this week. What an incredible opportunity for us to be on that range, to see our weapons in action, to prove to our sailors that we are ready to exercise combat at sea.
Yeah, I actually saw the photos just this morning. It was pretty incredible to see some of those images. A pretty great opportunity, like you've said. Now, Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy outlines a commitment to a free, open, and inclusive region. So as our ships transition from RIMPAC directly into Operation Horizon deployment, so this is our broader operational commitments to the Indo-Pacific, what does Canada's presence actually signal to both our allies and our adversaries in the region?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, commitment's important, presence is important. It's one thing to talk about being committed, it's another thing to actually be in the Indo-Pacific. And it's a massive body of water. Largest ocean in the world. Hawaii is 7 days away from Victoria, and it's another 2 weeks to arrive off the coast of Japan, for example. And so the concentration of Canadian forces in RIMPAC is really testament to our commitment to the region, to our allies, and to peace and security. The Indo-Pacific is it's a challenging region. Like I said, it's absolutely immense. A lot of transnational crime, climate change is affecting a number of our allies and friends in the Pacific. Territorial disputes are ongoing, threats to critical undersea infrastructure, and of course, cyber attacks. And so Canada being there and committed to peace and security and being there en masse, I like to say, because 800 Canadian Forces members, 3 ships, a submarine, that's a significant investment for us and really shows that the region is important.
Now, for a lot of Canadians back home, the Indo-Pacific feels a world away, of course. You've mentioned it's large, it's massive, it's complicated. So how do exercises like RIMPAC and our general presence in Asia and the Indo-Pacific directly protect things Canadians rely on every day, like shipping routes, economic trade, consumer goods?
Yeah, so that's a wonderful question. Canada's a maritime nation. We don't always remember that. We're an Atlantic nation, an Arctic nation, and a Pacific nation. 25,000 kilometers of Pacific coastline, 1,000 kilometers of waterfront in Canada, absolutely massive waterfront economic exclusion zone. We are a maritime nation. One thing Canadians don't know is I like to say we're a maritime nation. You're not yet a maritime trading nation. So less than 30% of Canada's economy flows through the ocean. That being said, as we grow our economy, as we invest in economic resilience, it will be through saltwater. Um, an interesting point. So Prince Rupert, had the opportunity to visit Prince Rupert earlier this year. It is the third busiest port in Canada. It's about to become the second busiest port in Canada. It is the fastest way to ship goods from China to Chicago is through Prince Rupert. And so Canada has a real opportunity to invest in sea power. And sea power, the Navy, the Coast Guard, the maritime industry, and national commitment to invest in all of those things that allow us to be a maritime trading nation and really, as I mentioned, increase our economic resilience.
Yeah, and you can tell currently that the government is looking west for us, but is looking to the Indo-Pacific for more and more trading opportunities. And one has to think our continued presence there is going to expand those connections and increase our ability to make those connections for sure. I'm really interested in the evolving nature of warfare. It's evolving fast across air, sea, subsurface, cyber domains. How is Maritime Forces Pacific adapting to ensure our fleets remain capable alongside our top global allies?
Yeah, so I would say, I'll start with the Royal Canadian Navy and the Canadian Forces and the Government of Canada. And the people of Canada are investing in a larger, more modern Navy. Our Navy is great, and we have invested in capabilities, our frigates, our submarines. But to be blunt, they're getting older, and we need to replace them, and there aren't enough. And so as a Navy, we're investing in, the government just announced up to 12 new submarines. The first river class destroyer is being built in Halifax. I expect HMCS Protector to be here in the harbor in Esquimalt within the next 12 months, followed shortly by HMCS Preserver. And then we're looking at other capabilities, corvettes, replacement patrol ships, the Arctic patrol ships, which have delivered all 6, operating around the world. So that is the biggest way. Right here in Victoria, on with those ships comes investment infrastructure. So about a $10 billion investment over the next 10 years, absolutely revamping the harbor, our accommodations, our jetties, our schoolhouses, everything you need to run a Navy. So incredible investment right here, because really that modern Navy is about building new capability and the supports. And the last thing, one of the amazing jobs I get to do is I'm responsible for all individual sailor training in Halifax, Quebec City, and here in Victoria. And so we're recruiting more bright, hardworking, innovative Canadians to come and serve within the Royal Canadian Navy. In 2025, we exceeded our recruiting targets for the first time in well over a decade, which is great. And we're getting those sailors here into our schoolhouse, getting them trained, getting them to sea. Because at the end of the day, we can buy as many ships as we need, but we need the sailors to sail them.
Now, as a middle power Navy operating alongside massive fleets like the U.S. Navy, where do you think Canada adds the most strategic value when it comes to regional deterrence?
Yeah, so the presence is important. When we conduct Taiwan Strait transits, for example, Canada being there is a signal about freedom and security. I worked for 3 years in the United States with the U.S. Second Fleet at Norfolk, Virginia, and we talked a lot about 1,000-ship Navy. And no one nation, no one partner ally is going to have 1,000 ships, but collectively we can. And so Canada can be a part of that. I think it's important we look at both capabilities that are interoperable, interchangeable, but also complementary. So as we buy very quiet diesel submarines, that complements the U.S. Navy's nuclear submarines. For example, as we buy P-8 aircraft, there'll be a one-for-one replacement to increase that capability for anti-submarine warfare across all 3 of our oceans.
Now, as the ships head out from Pearl Harbor, some heading home to Esquimalt, to Canadian shores, and others deeper into the Pacific, what do you think is the single biggest lesson MARPAC takes away from RIMPAC 2026 to shape future training and fleet recapitalization?
Yeah, so the biggest lesson I take, I'll take, I'll mention again the presence and the commitment. That steadfastness over 30 years is really important. But the biggest thing is we need a bigger Navy. Um, Quantity has a quality of its own. We need more ships. I have a lot of sailors to train. I need more platforms. It was incredible to see our Canadians first in Pearl Harbor with their allies and partners, and then seeing what they're doing at sea. But we need more of that, both to support our partners in the Pacific, to support NATO in the Mediterranean, the Atlantic, and then, of course, and most importantly, to defend Canada. So we know we need a naval presence in all three oceans, 365 days a year, and we're not yet big enough to do that. So my lesson, which I continue to take away, is we need to grow the Royal Canadian Navy.
That's a great lesson. RIMPAC brings together more than 24 nations with different perspectives and priorities. What do you think success looks like for Canada at the end of an exercise like this? Sort of how do you measure it, and how do you know we've achieved our objectives that were set out for us?
Yeah, so I mean the theme of RIMPAC this year that is set by U.S. Third Fleet, partners, integrated, and prepared. So for our forces, are we more prepared in the RIMPAC to conduct maritime operations in the Pacific? Absolutely. So that's a success. Individual ships who have done some weapons firing, who have had an opportunity to work with live submarines, or vice versa for Corbrook. That is, the crews are just more gelled and they're ready to proceed west. In fact, all of our forces are either going west or north. After impact, none of them are coming home yet. There's more work to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Admiral Patchell, thank you so much for your service. Thank you for your time today and engaging us in this excellent topic and excellent conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Really appreciate the interest.
And that's all for today's episode. The Expert Series is released every Friday. If you want to learn more about the CDA Institute, follow us on social media, visit our website at cdainstitute.ca, or subscribe to our newsletter for the latest updates on Canadian defense and international security. If you have comments or feedback about what you heard in today's edition, email our producer Josh at cdainstitute.ca. I'm David Borys. Until next time.